Hey Maoist rebel, 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 hey Maoist rebel. Did you hear about Xi Jinping? Everybody, chill out. I know. It's not like I wasn't going to notice.
Look in my eyes, what do you see? The cult of personality.
The major news among communist circles in the last couple days was the announcement by Xi Jinping that he said that China needed to return to Marxism. A very vague statement, and this has been something that I've been sent a ton of messages about. A lot of people have brought it up to me on Facebook and other places. Now, the thing about this is that Xi Jinping, the new president of China, is saying a lot of things in terms of Marxism. Now, before he was appointed to the position, in his district, he was saying a ton of things about how we should read Mao again. The people in China should read Mao again and return to those kind of roots, which is a very odd statement for a capitalist country to be saying. So while he is saying that people should return to Mao and that people should read Mao again, we do have to understand the context in which this is being said. What people sent me was the article from Systemic Capital. Now, a lot of people, I think what they didn't do was they didn't click the source, because this is read more, and you click the source and you go to the original, Indian article. I understand what he's saying when he's saying this. He's saying, when considering people for promotions, and he's understanding that these bureaucrats are just doing things, achieving certain objectives in order to get promotions within the party and higher ranks within the government. He was saying they shouldn't be using the GDP as a sole guide by how a good metric to be how they're performing. Like, it shouldn't be all down to the GDP. Meaning, don't just go by raw numbers to judge how well your district's doing, or whatever it is that you're in charge of, because that's not a good measure of the harmonious society that it is that China says they want. And that's a literal term. They say they want a harmonious society, which is extremely vague, which usually translates to profits up, people suppressed. Now, unfortunately, a lot of comrades are thinking that this is a good sign, that this is something that China is starting to go back towards socialism, and that we should be happy and encourage him. Unfortunately, that's not what he's really saying. Take a look carefully at what he's saying. He's saying we shouldn't use just numbers to determine how well we're doing. They should use other things like the Human Development Index, in which case China is actually very poor in that regard. Things like the society, amount of social unrest, stuff like that. Now, what he's doing is he's classifying these things as Marxist. We should be using a more Marxist guide. Now, what he's just doing is he's using the word Marxist to generalize a beneficial social situation. He's not saying let's to hell with capitalism that we've been doing since the early 80s, and then say go straight back to Marxism. Now, I probably more than anyone would be extremely excited if that was the actual case, but that's not what's happening in China. I mean, I dearly wish it was, but that's not what's taking place. And I said I'd be so happy if that was the truth. The thing is, Xi Jinping has this thing where he likes to invoke the image of Mao or invoke the image of Marxism in order to play to the people. I mean, Mao was still an extremely popular figure, the most polarizing and important figure, frankly, in all of Chinese history. And that is still in the consciousness of people. The achievements that were won by his efforts, where he guided the entire population to do what it is they did to transform their society in the revolution. He's using Mao's image to boost himself. Oh, we should do what Mao said. Yeah, Mao also said to hang the landlords. Mao also said to wipe out reactionary elements. He also said to, build socialism. But all of these things are being generally ignored. in that they're being ignored altogether. It's a move on his part to play to a popular sentiment. A lot of people are thinking, and rightfully so, that things were better in the social era. You know, we had more jobs, we had more social stability, we had universal health care, we had all the things that it is that we fought for in the revolution, and those things are no longer there. Now, who's the symbol that you think of that brought all that forward? And that's Mao. What Xi Jinping is doing is invoking his image to give that sense of progressiveness to the country that isn't there. In fact, it's been very regressive, particularly among the rights of women. That's what's happening here. China realizes things are going to have to change. He talks about, you know, social reform. He's talking about government reform. These things do have to happen. He's not stupid. He knows that a social pressure is building, not just from the actual social situation and interactions between people. Social alienation is really starting to take off in the country now, more so than previously. He's also aware that the economy is not growing the way it was. China needs about 7% per year in terms of economic growth, to double its GDP as it had planned by 2020. And that's, you know, with the global collapse of capitalism in 2008 and the lackluster recovery, that's not happening. Not to mention the fact that a lot of the manufacturing that was sent to China that accelerated this growth in the GDP or the economic situation is now being sent to India instead, where it's now cheaper to manufacture than it is in China. And he knows that this is a recipe for a social disaster. And by social disaster, I mean a disaster for the capitalist class. And that's really what this is about, is protecting their interests. Xi Jinping is not stupid. He knows what's happening. He knows that all the contradictions of capitalism, if he sees them as contradiction, are returning to where they were before under Chiang Kai-shek. Not on the same level, the same kind of contradictions, but on a higher level than they were before. Because that's the way contradiction works. The unity of opposites. It can transform into its other, but on a higher level than it once was. And that's what's happening in Chinese society. The ruling class in China, whether they be bureaucrats or billionaires, both of them, they're worried because they see social unrest increasing. They're seeing workers going on strikes and where they're just smashing the hell out of things, where foreign bosses, as I reported a couple of days ago, are being held hostage until they get paid. Those kinds of things are relatively unheard of in our society. If we go way back, we're going to find those things. But today, workers pissed off about not being paid, taking the boss hostage, is unheard of. I mean, this is not something that happens now in our society, but it is happening there. And these contradictions that have all returned as a result of the transformation back into capitalism are now starting to reach that point of agitation. As I said previously, if you remember the video where I did quantitative change into qualitative change, those quantities, that quantitative change is taking place right now because of the contradictions of capitalism, because of the contradictions of imperialism, China's relationship with the United States. Those quantitative changes are threatening to accelerate and eventually break out into a qualitative change. They are afraid, given the history of China and its past overthrowing of capitalists and landlords, that this could happen again. And it's one thing to say it, and it looks like something that's impossible to happen with the society they have now. But it's not. And they're afraid, if not that, something similar is going to happen to it. Their harmonious society, as they like to call it, is going to disappear. Now, this whole thing with Xi Jinping invoking the image of Mao is not some kind of progressive term. It's not their way of trying to go back to a better time when, like it was under socialism. It can't be that way. It's a capitalist society. And they're not going to go back to that because they're not going to challenge the wealth and the power of those who run China now. Yes, the party has a very odd relationship with the billionaires and millionaires of China. But they also know that those millionaires and billionaires are the ones they eventually have to answer to. And while that relationship between the two can be very strained, and sometimes the billionaires and millionaires outright hate the party for what it does, it still understands that they both need each other. And they both understand that aside from the contradiction between the bureaucratic apparatus and the market, by market I'm referring to the millionaires and billionaires, they both have a vested interest in keeping the working class from rebelling against the society that they have. And that is what Xi Jinping sees. He sees that the contradictions of society are starting to get out of control, especially with the economic situation. Like I said, the lack of growth in the economy to meet their targets by 2020. That's what he's worried about. That's what the society is worried about. And all this talk about Mao and going back to Marxism is all just to give him a flair or a flavor of the old days when the people had more control of their lives, to make them feel as though China is now being progressive in the way that it once was. So as much as I would love this statement by Xi Jinping to be signaling a return to Marxism in China, to return to Maoism, it's not. I dearly wish it was, but it isn't. And from what I've seen, a lot of comrades really jumped on this and took it as though it was something positive when it's not. And we have to sit back and we have to look at the material conditions that are taking place as he's seeing this. We're not using bourgeois thought. We're not looking at things in isolation. We're looking at them in the context of the society in which they exist. Xi Jinping is no more a good guy than Deng Xiaoping was. No more than Hu Jintao was. They're not the good guys. They are the class that, by revolutionary theory, would have to be overthrown and replaced with a real revolutionary government. And that's what I hope happens. So we should not think that this statement by Xi Jinping is a signal towards Marxism again, because very unfortunately, it is not.